Jai Hind, dear children. Today we are going to start a new session in your geography first chapter, Resources and Development. Last class you studied about what is a resource. What is the meaning of an interdependent relationship between nature, technology and institution with the help of a diagram. And then about the concept whether resources are free gift of nature or not. And last, you studied about the classification of resources in detail, isn't it? So now, through this video, you are going to study about the next topic in this chapter, resources and development, which is that, your topic is development of resources. In this topic, we want to study what is the need to develop our resources. Is there any problem faced by the resources? That's why we want to safeguard them or we want to develop them. Yes, our resources are facing some serious threats. That's why we want to develop them and we want to conserve them. So the main topics we want to cover in this area were the following. So the first topic is reasons for the over-exploitation of resources. We know that the resources in our country are over-exploiting or over-utilizing, isn't it? So there are many reasons for this. So now we want to study in detail what are the various reasons for the over-exploitation of resources. The second topic we want to cover is about the first International Earth Summit held in 1992 and what were the main objectives of this first International Earth Summit. The third main topic is what is resource planning and what is the importance of resource planning. The next topic is the need for resource planning in India. What are the various reasons that forced us to adopt the concept of resource planning in a country like India? The steps of resource planning, which were the three main steps involved in resource planning in India that we are going to study in this area. In this area, we will study what is colonization and how through this process of colonization, the foreigners, they are exploiting the resources. What is conservation of resources? Why we want to conserve our resources and about the Gandhian idea of conservation of resources. What was Gandhiji's idea about the conservation of resources? All these we are studying in this area. This is the last topic in this section where you want to study about the various efforts taken on the idea of conservation of resources on the international level. So now we are going to study in detail about the 8 main topics which were included in the main idea of or the main area of this development of resources in your chapter Resources and Development. So next, the first main reason why we want to conserve our natural resources or why we want to safeguard or preserve our natural resources is the over-exploitation of our natural resources. So we are going to study in detail the reasons for the over-exploitation of our natural resources. We have taken nature for granted because resources are vital for our survival as well as for maintaining the quality of our life. So that much important is resources for living beings, especially for human beings. But what we are doing, we are indiscriminately utilizing the resources. What is the meaning of the term indiscriminate? Without any careful distinction or without any careful planning, we are exploiting the resources and it leads to a lot of problems not only in our environment but also in our society. So now we are going to study which were the problems created as a result of these over exploitation. There are two types of reasons that leads to the over exploitation of resources. One is the greediness of human beings. Another one as a result of environmental problems. So first one, how the greediness of human beings leads to the over exploitation of resources. Resources in our environment have been depleted mainly for satisfying the greed of a few individuals. That means only a small group of individuals. So as a result, the resources get accumulated in few hands, which divided the society into two segments or two groups. That is haves or have-nots, or rich or poor. So the first main cause is that as a result of the over exploitation or the over greediness of the individuals, they over exploit the resources, and as a result they divide the society into two segments as haves or have-nots, or rich or poor. The first is the problem it created the society. So next we want to study the problems it created in the over exploitation of resources, that is created to the environment. That is a global ecological crisis. So as a result of this over exploitation of resources, it creates problems such as global ecological crisis, which includes problems like global warming. What is global warming? Rapid increase in Earth's average surface temperature, isn't it? So what is global warming? It is rapid increase in Earth's average temperature, which leads to the melting of the icy regions in the world, and it leads to the increase of our water level, created many problems to our Earth also. That is the one main reason related to this global ecological crisis. Next is the ozone layer depletion. What is the ozone layer depletion? Gradual thinning of the ozone layer in our upper atmosphere. It leads to the overheating of our atmospheric temperature also. So it also created some problems to our environment. Next is the environmental pollutions, different types of pollutions, and the last is land degradation. What is land degradation? The loss of the productive capacity of the soils in our earth. So these are some of the problems created or comes under the global ecological crisis, which were the main reason of this over exploitation of resources. Apart from all these, various other human activities like deforestation, that means cutting of trees in large numbers, overgrazing, and mining, that means the mining sites and construction activities, all these leads to the soil erosion. That is also another threat to our environment. So these were the serious threats created in our environment as a result of indiscriminate use of resources. All these created a serious danger to our planet. So in order to safeguard our planet and to have global peace, we want to adopt a sustained quality of life. So to give a lot of importance to this new concept, what is the concept? Sustainable quality of life. We are adopting a new idea. So we are adopting a new concept to safeguard our environment, to conserve our environment. That is a sustainable quality of life. And we can call it, or we can term it in a single way, that is sustainable development. So here we are going to study a new term, that is sustainable development. Or what is sustainable development? It is a process of economic development where resources are used judiciously to satisfy needs of not only the present generation but also to conserve them for the use of the future generation. So what is sustainable development? It is a process of economic development where the resources we want to use it in a judicious way, in an equal way, to satisfy the needs not only the present generation but the present generation, they want to use it. At the same time, they want to conserve these resources for the future generation also. That concept or that idea, we call it as a sustainable development, which is having a lot of importance, not in our India, but all around the world. In the global level, the sustainable development idea is having a lot of importance to safeguard our resources. So, to give importance to the idea of sustainable development, an international conference was held as the first International Earth Summit in June 1992 at Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, with the initiative of UNCED, that is United Nations Conference on Environment and Development. And in this conference, 100 countries had they met in Rio de Janeiro in June 1992. And the main idea of this was to safeguard our environment. The summit was, that means the Earth Summit was convened for addressing urgent problems of environmental protection and socio-economic development at the global level. So, the main idea of this Earth Summit was to give importance to the urgent problems that were happening in our environment and to overcome the socio-economic economic developments at global level. The assembled leaders, that means the 100 countries head, they signed at the Declaration on Global Climatical Changes and Biological Diversity. That means these 100 countries head, they signed in a declaration to give importance to this idea of global climatical change and biological diversity. Then the Rio Convention endorsed the global forest principles and they adopted a new idea, that is Agenda 21 for achieving sustainable development in the 21st century. So the Rio Convention, that means the Earth Summit that were held in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, they take a new idea, that is global forest principles, and they adopted Agenda 21, a new agenda for achieving sustainable development in the 21st century. Next, we want to study what are the three main core issues. They were highlighted through this Agenda 21 by our 100 countries head who met at Rio de Janeiro in Brazil in June 1992 as a part of the first International Earth Summit. The first core issue is to combat environmental damage which will happen all around the world. The second core issue is poverty, to overcome poverty at global level. And the third core issue is disease, also to overcome disease and to help other countries when they are affected with this type of some infectious diseases. So these are the three main core issues which come under the Agenda 21. And one of the main objective of this Agenda 21 is that every local government should draw its own local Agenda 21. That is a main objective of Agenda 21. So once again, what is the main objective of Agenda 21? The main objective of Agenda 21 is that every local government in every country should draw its own local Agenda 21. Next topic is resource planning. What is resource planning? Resource planning is a widely accepted strategy for judicious use of resources. So once again, what is resource planning? It is a widely accepted strategy or method for judicious use of resources. So what is the need of this resource planning in a country like India? Because India is a diverse country, and why we need of this resource, why we are in need of this resource planning? Because some of the resources like coal, petroleum are available in limited quantity. These resources are depleting at a faster rate also, isn't it? Because they are non-renewable. So it needs a resource planning for their sustained and judicious use. At the same time, some of the resources have been accumulated by a handful of people. This restricts equitable access to the resources and it created two segments in the society as haves and have-nots also. And the indiscriminate exploitation of resources is another factor that necessitate resource planning. So, resources are free gifts of nature. These should be used judiciously and in a way that the coming generation do not get deprived of these resources. So, to overcome all these problems, resource planning is important. It's very important for adopting our idea of sustainable development. Through this statement, we will understand more about the need of resource planning in a country like India, because India is a diverse country which has enormous diversity in availability of resources. But in India, there are some regions which are rich in certain types of resources, but at the same time, we are having some deficiency in some areas in some types of resources also. So, this you can understand very well with the help of some examples of some states in our country. In the states of Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh and Madhya Pradesh, we are rich in coal and mineral deposits, but lack in some other resources also. So these states, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh and Madhya Pradesh, they are rich in coal and mineral deposits, but they are lacking all other resources and developments. Arunachal Pradesh, the state Arunachal Pradesh has abundance of water resources but lacks in infrastructure development. That is also one thing that happened in our country. That means in Arunachal Pradesh we are having abundance of water resources but we lack all other resources, especially infrastructure development in that area. In the case of Rajasthan, that state is very well endowed with solar and wind energy. That is, the state of Rajasthan is rich in solar energy and wind energy, but they lack in water resources. So, that is also another problem our country is facing. Next is the cold desert of Ladakh. It is relatively isolated from the rest of the country, but that area, it is rich in cultural heritage. But what happened? They are deficient in water resources, infrastructure development and some vital minerals also. So another case is the cold desert of Ladakh. They are isolated from our country, but they are rich in cultural heritage, but because of their deficiency in water resources, some vital minerals and infrastructure development, they are really isolated from our country. So from this all states we can understand that there's no having any balance in our resource distribution in our country. We are having an unequal distribution of resources in India. So, a balanced resource planning is very important to overcome all these problems at national level, state level, regional level and local levels. Resource planning is a widely accepted strategy for judicious use of resources that we already studied. So, now we are going to study the three main phases or the three main steps involved in the resource planning in India. Resource planning is a technique or skill of proper utilization of resources. So for this proper utilization of resources, with the help of this technique and skill, we want to involve three phases or three steps which was widely used or widely accepted in the resource planning in India. So the first step it includes is the identification and inventory of resources or resource inventory. So my dear students, please keep in mind while writing this section, you want to just write the subheading also. Here you can write the subheading as identification and inventory of resources or resource inventory. So what is the first phase or what we include in the first phase? This resource inventory or identification and inventory of resources. It involves surveying, mapping, and quantitative and qualitative estimation and measurement of the resources across the country. So in this first phase, what we are doing, we are just surveying that area, we are just making a map related to that area, and we just find out the quantitative, that means the quantity, how much quantity of resources there in that area, the qualitative, whether it is best quality or not. That type of estimations and measurements were carried out through this first phase, that is identification and inventory of resources or resource inventory. Then the second phase, which is the second phase, evolving a planning structure or evaluation. So what is the second phase? Evolving a planning structure or evaluation. The second phase, it includes evolving a planning structure endowed with appropriate technology, skill and institutional setup for implementing resource development plans. So once again, this evolving a planning structure or evaluation, it includes a planning structure which will having an appropriate technology, skill, what types of technologies we want to use in that area and what type of skill we want to include in that area, and the various type of institutional setups. Institutions means here it depends on types of factories we want to set up in that area for implementing our resource in the proper way. That type of resource development plans were included in the second phase, that is evolving a planning structure or evaluation. Then the third phase, which is a third phase, that is overall development or matching the resources. So the third phase is an overall development. This consists of matching the resource development plans with overall national development plans. So once again, the third phase, that is overall development, it consists of matching the resource development plan with overall national development plan. So whatever development plan or resource plan we just find out or we just constructed in this area, so that development plan we want to use data for the overall national development plan, our country's economic development. These were the three main phases or three main steps included in the resource development plan in India. The availability of resources is a necessary condition for the development of any region. But what happened in India is that there are many regions in our country that are rich in resources, but these are included in economically backward areas. On the other side, there are many regions which have poor resources, but they are economically developed areas. So, as a result of these problems arose in our country, we want to give a lot of importance to our resource planning, the three phases of resource planning. Then only we can make use of all types of resources in the proper way, whether it is economically backward areas or economically developed areas, whether the quantity is less or the quality is poor. We can maximum utilize these resources with the help of our resource planning and its three phases. Next topic we want to study is colonization and exploitation of resources. So first of all, we want to understand the meaning of the term colonization. What is colonization? The process of settling among and establishing control over the indigenous people of an area is called colonization. So once again, what is colonization? The process of settling among and establishing control over the indigenous people of an area is called colonization. The history of colonization in different parts of the world reveals that rich resources in areas were the main attraction for the foreign invaders, and they convert those areas as their own colonies. And rich natural resources of colonies it was were the main attraction of these foreign invaders. What they do? They introduce technological development of the colonizing countries, which help them to exploit resources of the colonized regions. So these colonized countries, the That means the main power countries, what they are doing, whichever areas they are colonizing, in that areas they brought many new technological developments, because they know that with the help of the new technological development only they can exploit the resources in those areas. Therefore, resources can contribute to development only when they are accompanied by appropriate technological development and institutional changes. Institutional means new types of factories, machines, all that. So, as a result, these colonized countries were having new types of technological and institutional changes as a result of their colonization. And in India is also we are having this type of experience, because India had learned from her past experience that development in general and resource development in particular does not only involve the availability of resource but also the technology, quality of human resource and historical experiences of the people. That means from our colonization history, we understand that we are having a lot of changes in all spheres of life as a result of these colonization. Next is very important topic, that is conservation of resources. My dears, from all these topics you understand that our country is rich in different types of resources, but what happened as a result of our human beings greed and various other environmental problems, we are losing our resources, isn't it? So it's very important to adopt this new idea, that is a conservation of resources. So first of all, we want to understand what is conservation of resources. What is conservation of resources? It is the judicious and planned use of natural resources for sustainable benefit to the present generation. It also maintains a potential to meet the needs and aspirations of future generations. So once again, what is conservation of resources? It is the judicious and planned use of natural resources for sustainable benefit to the present generation, and it also maintains a potential to meet the needs and aspirations of the future generation. It is called conservation of resources. So next, conservation of resources is necessary because of various reasons. So why this conservation of resources is very necessary? Because our resources are limited in nature, therefore they have to be used judiciously, in a very equal way, in a very careful way, isn't it? So resources are limited in nature and they have to be used judiciously. But because resources are vital for any developmental activity. But irrational consumption and overutilization of resources leads to socio-economic and environmental problems. So, resources are vital for any development activity. But what happens? Irrational consumption and overutilization of resources may lead to socio-economic and environmental problems in our world. So, what we want to do, many of our resources are non-renewable in nature. Therefore, extra care has to be taken in that area also. To overcome all these problems, resource conservation at various levels is very important. Their conservation is necessary for our own subsistence and for the ongoing economic developmental process, because these resources they are increasing and they are developing the economic structure of our country. If we are safeguarding our resources in the proper way, it leads to the high level of economic development of our country. So, if the resources are not conserved at this point of time, then our future generation will be left with no resources at all. So it is very important to conserve all the resources in our environment. The conservation of resources were the main concern of many national leaders and thinkers in our country. And they work hard and they put forward many policies and programs to conserve our natural resources. For example, Gandhiji was very apt in voicing his concern about resource conservation in these words or through these words. There is enough for everybody's need, but not for anybody's greed. So once again, what was Gandhiji's concern about conservation of resources? There is enough for everybody's need, but not for anybody's greed. According to Gandhiji, the never satisfying nature of humans always wants more from the nature. Moreover, when one demand is met, humans set another demand of higher value. In this ever-growing demand trap, the nature is exploited and exhausted. The humans are not wise enough to reuse the valuable or available resources and plan the resources judiciously. That is the reason there is so much uneven distribution of resources in the world. So according to Gandhiji, in detail we can say that greedy and selfish individuals and exploitative nature of modern technology are the root cause for resource depletion at the global level. Gandhiji advocated that he was against mass production. What is mass production? Mass production refers to the manufacturing of large quantities of products using efficient methods or modern methods. So what is mass production? It refers to the manufacturing of large quantities of products using efficient methods or modern methods. So Gandhiji always advocated that he was against mass production, and he wanted to replace it with production by the masses. So what does it mean? Production by masses. That means a product produced with the help of many people. That is production by the masses. So Gandhiji was of the opinion that if we are reducing the use of mass production and if we are replacing it with a production by the masses, we can overcome two main problems of our country. One is unemployment and another one is poverty. At the same time, Gandhiji was of the opinion that irrational consumption and overutilization of resources, these two are the main problems that led to socio-economic and environmental problems. So, as a result of adopting this production by the masses and avoiding the idea of mass production, we can overcome many problems that faced by our country. So these were the main ideas of Gandhiji or Gandhian philosophy related to conservation of resources. The next topic is the efforts made for the conservation of resources at international level. In your textbook related to this chapter, there are four main efforts taken at international level by various organizations and personalities for the conservation of resources. The first one is the Club of Rome. They advocated resource conservation for the first time in a more systematic way in the year 1968. So once again, the first effort taken at international level for the conservation of resources is the Club of Rome. It held in 1968. And its main idea is the resource conservation in a more systematic way. Secondly, in 1974, E.F. Schumacher, he wrote a book, Small is Beautiful, based on the philosophy of Mahatma Gandhi or Gandhian philosophy. According to this book, it centralized the concept of sustainable development and also advocated for resource conservation. So once again, E.F. Schumacher in his book Small is Beautiful, which based on the philosophy of Mahatma Gandhi, centralized on the concept of sustainable development and resource conservation. Next is in 1987, the famous Brundtland Commission report. They made seminar contribution with respect to resource conservation. A new definition of sustainable development as a new concept that integrates the importance of development with the cause of environmental protection was the main idea of this Brundtland Commission report. This report introduced the concept of sustainable development and advocated it as a means for resource conservation. And they published a book. It was known as Our Common Future. So the famous book published as a part of this Brundtland Commission report is Our Common Future. And the most frequently quoted definition from Our Common Future, that book, also known as Brundtland Report, means related to the sustainable development is sustainable development is the development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generation to meet their own needs. So once again, the most frequently quoted definition from Our Common Future, that book, about the sustainable development, which is very famous all around the world, is that sustainable development is the development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generation to meet their own needs. Then the fourth one is in 1992, more than 100 heads of states, that means more than 100 countries head, they met in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil in 1992 for the first International Earth Summit to discuss the problems of environmental protection and socio-economic development. And it is in this Earth Summit they adopted Agenda 21 for achieving sustainable development in the 21st century. So these were the four main efforts taken in the international level for the conservation of resources. The first one is the Club of Rome. Second one, Schumacher's famous book Small is Beautiful. The third one is the Brundtland Commission report and the famous book Our Common Future related to that. The fourth one is the first International Earth Summit held at Rio de Janeiro in Brazil with adopting Agenda 21, giving importance to the idea of sustainable development in the 21st century. So now we will have a quick recall of what we studied in this video. First, we studied about the importance of development of resources. What were the reasons why we want to develop our resource, and what were the reasons that led to the indiscriminate exploitation of resources. Then what is the meaning of the term sustainable development? Why the first International Earth Summit was held in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil in 1992. What is the main idea taken in this first International Earth Summit? And next we studied about what is Agenda 21. What are the main objectives of this Agenda 21? Then about resource planning. What is resource planning? What is the importance of, or what is the need of resource planning in a country like India? Then we studied the three main phases or three main steps involved in resource planning in India in detail. Then we studied about the colonization and the exploitation of resources happen as a part of colonization in different parts of the world. Then about conservation of resources. What is conservation of resources? What is the need of conservation of resources? And what is Gandhian philosophy about conservation of resources? Then at last we studied about the efforts taken at international level for the conservation of resources, which includes Club of Rome. Then about Schumacher's famous book Small is Beautiful, Brundtland Commission report and their famous book Our Common Future. Then about the last one, the first International Earth Summit held at Rio de Janeiro in Brazil in 1992. Dear children, watch the video very carefully. While watching the video, keep your geography textbook with you and mark the important points in your textbook and copy down the important points and write it in your textbook itself. It will be very helpful for you while studying the chapter, and read your textbook 3 or 4 times. It will help you to just find out the 1-mark questions and other points also. And always write your answers point wise. 3 mark, 5 mark questions answers, always write it up point wise. Okay, thank you.